Good morning, everyone. This is Adrenia Tolliver. We will be starting in about a minute or so. If you can go ahead in the chat box, type in your name and which MRC unit that you volunteer with. We'll be starting shortly. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. As you all are coming on in, feel free to type in your name and which MRC unit that you represent in the chat box. Seems like we're going to have a full house today. Good morning to everyone again. My name is Adrenia Tolliver. I am one of the training coordinators from the Office of Emergency Preparedness at Virginia Department of Health. As you all probably have seen already, I am the one that you speak to by way of email, phone calls concerning statewide trainings. Next slide. Just a reminder, all lines are muted except for our presenters. So if you have any questions, please put those in the chat box. Next slide. If you do not want to share your camera, if your camera is on, just select the stop video down in the bottom left-hand corner. If you want to close your chat box for whatever reason, you can also click at the bottom. You will see you have a menu options. Just click on chat. That would either turn your chat off or on. So just keep that in mind. I know some folks don't like to have their chat box open during presentation. I will say you may want to look at it towards the end because that is one way that we will be communicating. So you may want to open it back up at the end to receive the attendance form link, which will be provided at the end, and you will be responsible for completing that form on that link to say that you have attended this training on today. Next slide. And next slide. So today we're going to be offering a training on ICS 100 and 700 overview. Just a reminder that this is a refresher course and overview. This course today, training today, does not take the place of the FEMA ICS 100 and 700 courses that is required by a lot of the facilitators. I think it just lost me. Again, today, the ICS 100 and 700 overview is a refresher, an overview of the FEMA courses, ICS 100 and 700 that is required by your coordinators. It does not take the place of those courses. So if those courses are required before you become deployable or be able to volunteer, you do still need to take the FEMA 100 and 700 courses listed in TRAIN, our learning management system. Today is just an overview or refresher for that course. If you have taken this course before, sat through it before, you do not have to sit through it again. If you have sat through the FEMA 100 and 700 ICS courses, you do not have to sit through this course again either. Again, this is an overview and refresher of those courses. Please keep in mind that all your lines are muted. So if you have any questions, put those in the chat box. Next slide. So presentation today will be given by James Slater, who is one of our training coordinators as well at Virginia Department of Health at the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Also one of our ICS FEMA instructors. And so he will be providing the presentation on today. The presentation slide deck and the presentation recording will be made available in the future at a later date. And now I will turn it over to James Slater.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is James Slater. I am with the Virginia Department of Health, Public Health Preparedness Training Coordinator. As Adrenia has said, I do instruct ICS as the full cadre for FEMA and for the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. It's one of those things that, you know, I love FEMA as far as like a lot of what they're trying to do. So we want to make sure we get that out there and have the skills and tools available to you. I mean, a lot of things that you may not realize that are available, they're there for you. There are lots of resources. So I do want to reiterate, this is not a replacement for the 100 and 700. It is something that you do have to take. But we do want to kind of give you the overview to let you know where you stand. There are a lot of people that come into this that have no emergency experience whatsoever. That's fine. Then we have people that come in from the military. They come in from the EM realm. So we want to make sure we're providing you the best tools and resources available. So some of the objectives that we're going to follow up on today are we're going to identify 3 purposes of ICS and explain the benefits of using ICS. We're also going to explain the purpose of the National Incident Management System, which is also known as NIMS. And one thing that you're going to notice in this is that there's a lot of acronyms, and, you know, FEMA is its own worst enemy in that it tells you don't use acronyms. You want to use common terminology, plain language, but every single class that they have, every single thing that they do, there's an acronym attached to it. So we want to make sure we pay close attention to that. So I don't want to lose you when I throw out an acronym. So I do try to follow it up by whatever the 3-letter is and then what the actual meaning is. We're also going to describe the basic features of ICS. We're going to explain the benefits of using ICS as well as explaining the difference between NIMS and ICS. We're also going to recognize that NIMS and ICS discussions can be filled with TLAs. And this is kind of what I touched on a little bit already, and that's the 3-letter acronyms. And 3-letter acronyms, well, you can get bogged down in it. It's one of those things that depending upon what line of work that you're in on a day-to-day basis, that same acronym could actually be something completely different. So first, we want to start off in looking at what is an actual incident. So an incident is an occurrence or event that can be natural, it can be man-made, and it requires a response to protect life or property. So a little bit of history behind this is that Virginia adopted the National Incident Management System in November of 2005. The state coordinator of the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, or VEDM, is responsible for NIMS implementation. And what that means is that they run the entire cadre of how NIMS is rolled out across the state. So when I use NIMS, the National Incident Management System, what is it? So the textbook definition is a consistent nationwide approach for federal, state, tribal, and local governments to work effectively and efficiently together to prepare for, prevent, respond to, and recover from domestic incidents, regardless of cause, size, location, or complexity. Now, one of the reasons that I gave you the textbook definition, and I put the air quotes on both ends of that, is that when you go to take the ICS 100 and 700, I'll give you some cautionary tales around the exam, is that they look for very specific verbiage for a lot of the questions. And it can be tricky. It could be one word missing, one word changed, which changed the intent of what the answer should be. And there's also a lot of answers that seem like it might be the right answer, but it's not actually the right answer. There's one that actually stands out above and beyond all of them. So that's why I give you the textbook definition, because this is one of those answers that might show up on an exam down the road. So where does ICS fit in? Well, if you look at NIMS, NIMS is the house. And so if you're looking at the picture here, you see a house, it's made of bricks. It looks pretty sturdy. And NIMS is that overall structure, but ICS is one piece of that building. So when you break that down, ICS is just a brick in the foundation. And we know that if you take a brick out, that structure is not as sound and can fall down. It can collapse around you. So looking at this diagram, we have the National Incident Management System. And under that, there are three main categories. You have resource management, command and coordination, and communications and information management. Those are the three main criteria of NIMS. Under command and coordination, what we're focusing on today is ICS, the Incident Command System. Incident Command System works within that command and coordination role. So what is the Incident Command System? Well, some might say that it's a standardized on-scene all hazards approach to incident management. And what that means, all hazards, is it's very easy for us in health to get bogged down in that, what we're dealing with currently is a pandemic. It's very easy for us to get bogged down on that. And does ICS work for it? Absolutely. We're using ICS all throughout the pandemic response. But all hazards means that we can take this same structure and we can apply it to a tornado. We can apply it to a hurricane, a snowstorm. I'll be honest with you. I actually use ICS for Thanksgiving dinner. And you think, well, how can you use for ICS for Thanksgiving? Well, Thanksgiving, if you think about it, there's a lot of moving parts, and you need somebody that's in that role that's in charge. And then you need a plan. And really what this is a standardized plan for my Thanksgiving every single year. So everybody has a role, everybody knows what they're doing. And we'll get into that a little bit more as an example later in the course. Incident management or incident command system also allows users to adopt an integrated organizational structure. So we all know that everyone has a role, and that way everyone should know what they're doing. It also has considerable flexibility. So what that means is it can be scaled up or scaled down based on the size and scope of your incident. ICS is also a proven management system based on successful business practices. So this isn't something that we just took spaghetti, threw it against the wall and said, hey, we hope it sticks. This is something that's been worked through over quite a few years. In fact, ICS started back in the 1970s out of the fire programs in California to fight the wildfires. Because when you had a lot of different wildfires going on in a lot of different areas, it's a strain on resources, it's a strain on management, it's a strain on workforce. So it enables them to bring it all together and manage those tasks. So what is ICS designed to do? Well, one of the things is meet the needs of incidents of any kind or size, and that goes back to that all hazards position. It also allows personnel from a variety of agencies to meld rapidly to form a common management structure. So whenever there's an incident in the state of Virginia that the State Emergency Operations Center is operationalized, I staff that State Emergency Operations Center. In that role, we have what's called ESF 8, which is the Emergency Support Function 8, and that happens to be public health and medical. Well, while I'm there, I'm working with a lot of different organizations that talk a lot of different languages in their day-to-day roles. So I'll work with VDOT or the Department of Transportation. I'll work with the VOADs, which is the volunteer organizations. I'll work with the National Guard. I'll work with the Department of Forestry, Agriculture. Also, you have communications like Verizon and Dominion Virginia Power. They're all playing an integral role, but in their day-to-day, they're doing different things. But when we come together, we can all function as one solid team. ICS also allows us to provide logistical and administrative support. Some agencies are a lot thinner than others in certain aspects of their emergency response. So we can provide that logistical and administrative support to them when we come together. So we might have someone from the Department of Health in an admin role working with Department of Agriculture because of something that of some type of pandemic effect on the animals. It could also be cost effective by avoiding duplication of efforts. So if every single agency is doing the exact same job or having one role that they're all doing, we can kind of bring that down a little bit and make one group effectively to do that. It also provides overall interoperability, which means that we can all work together. We can all talk the same language. We can all say the same things and understand what everyone else is doing. ICS represents a organizational best practices and has become the protocol for incident management across the country, and in some cases across the world at this point. Really, the whole community approach is that every part of society must be involved for ICS to fully function. That's the federal government. The federal government, where this all started with, is only one part of that whole community. The government can't do it all. In fact, a lot of times the federal government, I mean, some of the worst words that people want to hear is, I'm with the government, I'm here to help you, right? So this takes the whole community approach. Everybody has to have skin in the game. Everyone needs to be able to work together. And that way we can make sure we have solutions that serve the entire community that are implemented. And if you look in the diagram, we have the non-government organizations, higher education, so the colleges and universities, agriculture, transportation, the state governments, which is where we come out of, chemical, nuclear, the local governments, faith-based, law enforcement, private sector orgs, public works, and healthcare. So when does public health use ICS? Well, we use it in a lot of different times. We use it in response to bioterrorism threats or events, chemical, radiological, nuclear events. We have disease outbreaks. We have hurricanes, floods. And if you can think, what type of examples might you have? You can certainly type those in the chat box. If you want to add those to the list, that's great. That's definitely something that we're always looking to see how we can actually use it more effectively. Earthquake, I see earthquake in there. That's great. We also have 5 incident management functions. So, we're kind of looking at the 1,000-foot view, and we're starting to get a little closer down on ICS and how it can affect you and how it works. So in ICS, we have an incident command, and the incident command is always going to be in charge. So that's the person, and that as the incident command, you have an incident commander, and the incident commander is the one that's going to sign off and is responsible for everything under an incident. But the incident commander can't do it alone. So they definitely have to work together with other groups. So with the incident commander, they may be responsible for everything, but they need good people in the various roles to actually take control of different functions. So one of those functions is the operations section. We have the planning section, we have the logistics section, and we have the finance and administration section. All these are like, remember the bricks in the NIMS? So ICS is a brick in the NIMS wall. Well, these are the bricks within the incident command. So when you look at it in your day-to-day job, it's not going to look the same in an ICS organization. A lot of times you have people that are in roles, maybe as supervisors, that aren't a supervisor in the day-to-day, but when we go to an ICS function, they may take on that role. And I like to term that as the hats. We all wear different hats in our jobs. And sometimes we have to take our normal day-to-day hat off, and then we have to put our incident command hat on and say that I'm going to be the operations section chief, or I'm going to be the planning section chief, etc. But it's not your day-to-day operations. We have the operations chief, and it manages all incident-related tactical activities. We have planning chief, gathers all and disseminates information critical to the incident. We have the logistics chief, and the logistics chief manages all service and supports activities. Now, I want to go back a little bit here, because when we look at the operations chief, they're going to manage all the relations to those tactical activities. But the people that work under the operations chief, I term those as boots on the ground. They're the ones that are actually making the things happen out in the field. So, we all know that incidents happen at a local level. These are the people that are there working the incident. The operations chief is just the ones that's over top of that. The planning chief is going to gather and disseminate the information that's critical to the incident. The operations people are going to use to fulfill the mission. The logistics chief manages and services all support activities. So anything that the operations needs, based on the plan that the planning section created, the logistics chief is the person that's going to get it. They're going to get the things in order to function out in the field. And I always look at the logistics chief as we all have that friend as the I got a guy. You know, I need somebody to put a roof on my house. Well, I got a guy. You know, I got a guy that can do that, right? So that's the logistics chief. They know where to get stuff. They know how to get stuff. They know where to find it. The finance and administration chief manages on-scene finance and administrative support. So they're the ones that are counting the beans. They're the ones saying, okay, well, the planning section says that we need X for the operations section to use. Well, once the logistics chief finds it, the finance and administration is going to figure out how to pay for it. They're going to track it. They're going to make sure that it gets paid and returned when we demobilize. So within the ICS organization, we have the incident commander, and that's the command staff. We have the command staff here. So directly under the incident commander, as I said before, they can't do it alone. And we have those other items, or there's other chiefs that are going to run the organization. But the incident commander has those that are actually reporting directly to him or her to help them fulfill the mission. So that would be a safety officer. And the safety officer is responsible for the safety of all those within the incident command structure. So they're not responsible for the general public. They're not responsible for those in the general public that are being affected by the incident. They're only responsible, their duty is for the safety of those that are responding. So it would be like, let's say that there was a fire and it was a really big fire, a big like warehouse building, and they get to the scene and the firefighters pull up. The safety officer is going to figure out whether or not it's safe for them to even go in the building. They're going to make sure that the proper safety equipment is being used, that if they don't have it, they're going to reach out to logistics to get it, but they're going to be responsible for the safety of those within the ICS structure. You have the liaison officer. Well, we mentioned that there's a lot of organizations and a lot of agencies that we work with in a variety of incidents. That liaison officer can be a go-between between our ICS organization and those outside of the ICS organization. And then you have an information officer. You'll also hear it termed as a PIO, or public information officer. That a PIO is the one that's making sure information is being shared outside of the organization properly. So if we have a message that we need to send, if we need to make sure we're getting the information out about we're rerouting a road or don't go to a certain location, that public information officer is going to help craft the message. The incident commander is going to sign off on it, and then they're going to get it out into the public. And that could be through the media. It could be throughout social media channels, but they're going to make sure that that gets out. And then we drop down to the ones that we saw before: the planning section, operations, logistics, and the finance and administration. They're what we call the general staff. So we have the incident commander, that's the command. We have the command staff that reports directly to the incident commander. And then we have the general staff that reports up to the incident commander. So let's say that our ICS organization, has to expand or contract. The ICS organization can be as big or as small as you need it. So when you're looking here, these are all the ones that we saw before, but you'll look down under the planning, operations, logistics, and finance admin, we've added some additional ones. So those, if we need a planning section, that's great, but let's say that we need a planning section unit. We have a couple of different units to fulfill different things as part of planning. So if we look at our ICS structure during our pandemic response, under our planning section, we may have a vaccination unit. We have a testing unit. There was a PPE or a logistics unit from the PPE from that perspective and getting that out. So there are lots of different units that we can go along with planning that will focus on those specific things. Then we have operations. Now, operations is a little bit different. They don't use units. They use branch, divisions, or groups. So it's a little confusing because in a perfect world, FEMA kind of didn't do us any good service on that, and that they would have made everyone have a unit This particular one, they did it in branches, divisions, and groups for operations. Logistics also has units, and then the finance and administration. So finance and administration, a good example of that would there might be somebody that's focusing strictly on the HR portion, making sure that the correct hours are logged for a payroll, making sure the correct volunteer hours are calculated. There might be, then another unit might be focusing on paying specific things that logistics purchased. So there's these different units. Now, in a small event, we may not need any of those units. And when we look at the expanding and contracting, I kind of use the example of, let's say that I'm at home and I'm cooking, and I have a little flash of a grease fire, and I put a lid on it and it goes out. Well, in that situation, I was the incident commander because I took command of the incident. I was on scene. I did the job. It's done. But let's say that I instead of covering it to smolder the fire, I threw water on it. The water goes up, splashes on the wall, starts a fire. Well, I need to expand the organization out because then I'm calling in the fire department to put out the fire. And the fire department is going to fulfill out some of these other roles of planning, operations, etc. Well, let's say that my house, while it's on fire, it blows up and it takes over a couple of different houses. And now there's like the entire block is on fire. You can see how that would have to expand out in order to have the manpower to do the roles that are needed. That's where ICS comes in, but it gives us an orderly way for us to be able to do that. So there is a flow of requests for assistance. So it's not just say, hey, me, Joe Smith at my house and that like little grease fire that I'm reaching out to the state EOC for help. It doesn't work that way. The response or the incident happened on the local level, but that local is going to expand. So it would go up to the locality. And then from the locality that you look at the request. So we have the local EOCs, and then it goes up to the state. So when at the local, if I can't handle it at the local level, and that could be from a logistics perspective, I can't get the things I need. I don't have the money to pay for them. There are these different, or I don't have the manpower, or I don't have the specific thing that I need to function, then we're going to reach up from the local level. We're going to go up to the state, and the state's there to help and provide as much coordination relief as we can. And then from the state, it's going to go up to the federal agencies. If the state says, hey, you know what, we're not really throwing the white towel, but we've kind of tapped in to everything we have in our state cash. Well, then we're reaching out to other states around us through mutual aid compacts, or we're going up to the federal agencies and departments. And we're saying, hey, feds, can you give us a help? And that's where FEMA would come in and providing some type of resource, or CDC providing some type of resource. And then that assistance flows back down. It flows to the state, it flows to the local, it flows to the incident. So there is a request flow. We need to make sure that we're following that process. If we kind of circumvent, going around the local EOC, well, the local EOC already has some type of resource to either have it, or they have something to already get it. But if they're not in the know, they can't provide that assistance. And an EOC is the Emergency Operations Center. So just an ICS quick quiz. Now some examples of how ICS is used to manage incidents. Which of the following situations do you think represents another reasonable use of ICS? So the coordination of a regional take-back event for MRC volunteers. Or the calculation of the volunteer hours for the month of May 2020. So when we go back to the other question, who do you think the coordination of the regional drug take-back event for MRC volunteers? Who do you think would function in that role? And you can type your answer in the chat box. All right, so when we're looking at that, we're getting a lot of answers across the board. When you're looking at the coordination of the regional drug take back event for MRC volunteers, you may have an incident commander as part of that. The incident commander is going to be coordinating that. You're going to have the planning that's working to coordinate and provide the plan around it. It really depends upon which part that you're going to form as part of that cadre. Now, when we look at the calculation of the volunteer hours for the month of May, and I kind of gave you that answer a little while ago, who do you think would be doing the calculation of those volunteer hours? And you can type your answer in the chat box. And I'm seeing a lot of the finance and administration, and that's correct, finance and admin. So they're going to calculate that for us. The next one we're going to see is the oversight of volunteer safety for a door-to-door tetanus vaccination effort following a tornado in your region. Who do you think is going to provide that oversight of safety for an ICS structure? And you can type your answers in the chat box. And that is the safety officer. That is the safety officer. That is absolutely correct. So great answers there. How about this one? Coordination of supplies such as badges, t-shirts, etc. for volunteers at a health screening event for the community. Who do you think is going to coordinate those supplies? So you can type your answer. There we go. I'm seeing logistics. Excellent. They are coordinating those supplies. Excellent. All right, so we're done with the quiz now, so we do appreciate that. So incident command and common terminology is where we're going to move on to. So common terminology is what is said to use plain English to allow personnel from different agencies to work together. And you'll see plain English, plain language, common terminology. These are all kind of synonymous things. What FEMA is really trying to get at is that we want to make sure we're using common terminology to cover organizational functions, resource descriptions, and incident facilities. So we really want to look at, how does this apply to you? Well, in your day-to-day role, one 3-letter acronym might mean one thing to you, and something might mean something totally different. I'll give you an example from a law enforcement perspective. That let's say that, a lot of law enforcement agencies used to use 10 codes like 10-4, 10-8, 10-6. And, when I start throwing those numbers out to you, you have no idea what I'm talking about, most likely. Well, fortunately, we've moved away from those 10 codes because I could be in one jurisdiction and say 10-8. In another jurisdiction, and in my jurisdiction, it might mean that I'm going to lunch. But in the neighboring jurisdiction, a 10-8 might mean that I'm dealing with a mental health situation for a patient. Big difference in what a 10-8 means there. So that's why we've decided to move away from the acronyms or the 10-8 codes, or the 10 codes is what they called them. That way we're all talking the same language. Communication should also be in plain English or clear text. And we want to make sure that we're not using radio codes or agency specific codes or jargon, because if I work in one agency, I don't know what the other agency means. So a great example is in the Emergency Operations Center, the EOC that we work, is that I was working in an exercise once, and the exercise spelled out, and they were their own worst enemy in it. When they did the design of the exercise, it kept talking about pods. It kept talking about, these are the pods that we're going to use. We need to set up a pod. Well, I'm in public health and medical. My first thought is that a pod is a point of dispensing for meds. So, as I go through, we want to make sure that we're putting those information in there. If I think it's a point of dispensing, I'm thinking about trying to set up pods for some type of a medical event. What they actually, in the design of the exercise, it was point of distribution. They were trying to give out generators. So FEMA's or Department of Emergency Management and their logistics section, they were using pods as point of distribution. It doesn't work. So that's something that, you know, we're trying to work towards getting away from those. So management by objectives. So ICS is managed by objectives overall. So if I don't have a good objective, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have to understand what those goals are. And so objectives are communicated throughout the entire ICS organization, throughout the incident planning process, to make sure that everyone knows what our end goals are and how we're going to get there. Every incident has to have an IAP, or an incident action plan. So an incident action plan spells out what's specific to the incident objectives. It says what those incident objectives are. It also states the activities that have to be completed to achieve that. It also covers a time frame called an operational period. How long am I speculating that this is going to take me to complete that set of activities to reach the set of objectives? Now, an IAP, or an incident action plan, could be oral or it could be written. So, you know, if I'm a firefighter and I'm driving up to a scene, you know, they only have information that was called in through the 911 system. But as they're going there, they're formulating an incident action plan, but they're not writing it out in a notebook. They're formulating it in their heads to figure out how they're going to work the incident when they get there. Now, that can change. And then when they get there, they have to change that incident action plan to go back to what those specific incident objectives are once they see what there's there on scene. So every IAP must have 4 elements. And it's kind of like the who, what, when, where, and why, but we look at what do we want to do? We look at who is responsible for doing it. How do we communicate with each other? And what are the procedures if someone is injured? So your IEP has to spell out those 4 common elements. So within the ICS organization, there's no correlation with the administrative structure of any other agency or jurisdiction. So as public health, if we're working a specific event, we may not take on the same structure that we have day to day. We're going to go into the ICS structure, and we have our health commissioner, or at the local level, we have a local health director, but that local health director may not be in charge of that overall incident. So we're going to fall back outside of that administrative structure. Now, the organization's uniqueness helps to avoid confusion over different position titles and organizational structures. So if I'm a supervisor in my day-to-day role, it takes away, there's no supervisor listed in an ICS structure. You have a section chief, not a section chief supervisor. We also have someone that serves as a chief as every day may not hold that title deployed under an ICS structure. And this goes back to me talking about taking the hat off. If I work in a certain role in my day-to-day job, then I'm going to take that hat off and I'm going to put on the hat for ICS to do the role that I've been trained to do under that specific job. So when we look at, who's in charge and, how many people are going to report there, we look at that as what's called a span of control. So in the incident command, the span of control is the number of individuals or resources that one supervisor can manage or one section chief can manage and effectively do during an incident. Now, it's key to be effective and efficient incident management. If we don't have it, then we're going to get lost there. We have a lot of people working under one person. You kind of lose that control over what each of them are doing. So you want to manage that. So what do you think that number is? What do you think an effective span of control? If I'm in charge, how many people under me do you think that I can effectively manage? And you can go ahead and type that in the chat box as well. Anyone? Okay. Well, the effective span of control is anywhere between 3 and 7. The optimum number to supervise is 5, but they say, you can have 3 people working for you to 7 people, but really the optimum number is 5. Sometimes you'll see between 3 and 10, but really 3 to 7, but we want to shoot for those 5 people, because really, if you think about it, you start losing that contact, that touch point with when you get more than those 5 people overall. Now, that shows that how many people that should work under you, but we also have what's called a chain of command. And chain of command is the orderly line that details how authority flows. It allows the incident commander to direct and control the actions of all personnel in the incident. And it also avoids confusion by requiring that orders flow from supervisors. So when you have the incident commander is going to sign off on whatever they need to be done. And that's going to get passed down to the section chiefs. And that section chief is going to pass it down to the unit supervisors or leaders, or within the branches and units. So that's how the chain of command goes. Now, information can flow up and information can flow left to right, but the chain of command is always going to be top down. Now, unity of command is that you will report to only one incident command system supervisor. You'll receive work assignments only from your ICS supervisor. And when you're assigned to an incident, you're no longer report directly to your day-to-day supervisor. So these are 3 very important points. We need to make sure we have that unity of command, that I'm only reporting to one person. Because remember, your supervisor in your day-to-day role may not be a supervisor under the ICS structure. So we want to make sure whoever you're reporting to, there's that clear vision of that unity of command and what that chain of command looks like to report up. Now, there is a difference that we talked about unity of command. So that's reporting to one supervisor, but there's also unified command. So unified command is a little different. Unified command enables all agencies with responsibility under the ICS structure to manage the incident together by establishing a common set of incident objectives and strategies. So right now we have a unified command under the pandemic response. We have Department of Health, we have Department of Emergency Management, we have National Guard. We have a unified command response, but we all have one set of objectives. That's a unified command. We all have skin in the game when we're working it. So some ICS nuggets for you. Things to remember is the incident commander has overall responsibility. Common terminology is used to help reduce confusion between ICS and the day-to-day positions. Span of control varies from 3 to 7 staff, but the optimal is 5. The incident action plans establish the overall incident objectives, strategies, and tactics. So those are some nuggets that might show up on a FEMA exam for an ICS 100 and 700 course. So let's do your best guess game. So the question here is, which incident command position is responsible for all incident activities, including the development of strategies and tactics and the ordering and release of resources? And you all are correct at the incident command, because the key here is responsible for all incident activities. So remember, I said the incident commander, they're responsible for everything. They're going to sign their name, that incident action plan, they're going to sign their name on that incident action plan saying, go forth, prosper. So they're responsible for it. So good job. Next. As a volunteer, which section chief would you likely work under during an incident? Would it be logistics, planning, or operations? And I'm seeing the C's and operations flow quick before I can even get the question out. That's great. Yeah, you are the boots on the ground. You are, you're responsible to get a lot of the stuff that's part of the operation is done. So you're the boots on the ground there. That's great. So when we look at a outbreak response, when we use ICS in public health, if this was a tuberculosis outbreak in the fictional town of Mountain View, Virginia, what functions or activities do you see for an MRC volunteer to support that type of incident response? So if this was a TB outbreak or tuberculosis outbreak, as an MRC volunteer, what would you do to as a response to that incident? And I'm seeing pod, staffing, contact tracing, information, vaccinator, lots of roles, right? You could be asked to do a lot. I mean, you are the boots in the ground. So good. So the next question, we'll move on to the next question. Which general staff position might the district nurse manager serve in during the outbreak for a TB event? So which general staff position, remember the general staff, right? Those four main positions there under the incident commander. Which general staff position do you think a district nurse manager might serve in during an outbreak? Yeah, I mean, they could definitely be in operations. And remember, a district nurse manager, depending upon the size of the operation, if it's not just done with that locality, let's say that expanded out, it may not just be for that nurse manager for that locality. They may serve in an operations role, but I could be a nurse manager from another locality that's been come in to take on a role. And I could be in those other ones of planning, logistics, etc. So absolutely. Because like I said, a lot of times we're taking hats off of what we do day to day and taking on other roles. So lastly, what during your shift while working that incident, you notice that a critical supply is running low and about to run out. Who would you report that to? All right, I see it's supervisors, I see logistics. You're definitely going to let your supervisor know for sure. You're also going to let logistics know, but you can also make sure you're letting planning know. Logistics and planning would be the ones that you're also letting know. So you let your supervisor know, your supervisor is going to let logistics and planning, because logistics needs to know that they need to go out and get more. Planning needs to plan on, okay, did we not plan for enough? And do we need to plan for more in the future to make sure those information, that those items are coming in? Good. So last question on here. When you look at this, is this NIMS or ICS? So when you look at that diagram here, are we looking at NIMS, or are we looking at the National Incident Management System, or are we looking at an incident command system? Yep, we are looking at ICS. We are looking at ICS because remember, this is without this, we don't function under NIMS. NIMS is the overall overarching in that command experience, but ICS is how we actually functionalize or operationalize it. So a couple of things that I want you to remember is that you may someday be a non-leader, placed in a position of leadership. That's okay. I know a lot of times you look at yourself and say, hey, I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to lead anything. But the reality is that if we've asked you to do it, we know you can do it. We know that you can function in the role that we're putting you in. So even though you feel that you're a non-leader, you can be placed in that role of leadership. We have faith in you. You may also be a leader placed in a position of non-leadership, but there you have to remember that you can't do everything yourself. So you could be in a day-to-day supervisor role, but come an incident, you may not have that supervisor hat, because we all need to take on a role to have ICS function. You also want to try to apply ICS during your everyday activities to learn the terminology for use during an emergency. So I know we said we want to use plain language. We want to use common terminology, but you want to look at what terminology is being used. You know, I said FEMA is their own worst enemy in this, is that I've used NIMS, I've used ICS, I've used EOC, I've used all of these acronyms. Now I've backed them up with what they are, but if you didn't know them beforehand and I just started throwing those out, it might be good to look at what type of, like a glossary of emergency management terms, because those are things that could get thrown at you and you may not know. But we want to make sure that you're prepared. You also want to know that your individual responsibilities will be for all emergencies. And it, again, you know, yes, you're within the Medical Reserve Corps, but you may not be doing something specifically medical, one. Two, it may not be for a pandemic. Right now it is, but it may not be for a pandemic response. It could be we function during elections. We've worked with the earthquakes and going and providing response to that. Hurricanes, we've provided, hurricanes, when they came through, we sent MRC volunteers to North Carolina. So marathons is another great example. We provide to a lot of different incidents or events, but it's not always necessarily going to be an emergency, but it will be for all emergencies and many types of events. But you want to make sure you prepare yourself and family too, and you can only serve others if you're prepared at home first. So this is one of those things that, you know, yeah, we love the fact that you're volunteering through the MRC. But we also want you to make sure you're taking care of yourselves as well. So part of that is making sure you have a plan. You know, when you're called on to volunteer, you want to make sure that you have someone that is in place for kids, job, animals, etc. You want to make sure you have that set of supplies to make sure that you're taken care of first. It goes that the old adage, when you're on an airplane, you always put on your air mask, your oxygen mask first, because if you can't breathe, you can't help others. So we want to make sure that you're taken care of. So make sure that you're prepared at home. So when we look at the ICS courses, we said that today was an ICS overview of 100 and 700. So specifically, ICS 100C is the Introduction to Incident Management. So that's just basic ICS terminologies and structure. The 700 piece of it is an introduction to the National Incident Management System. That's the NIMS piece. So they're two separate courses because they're two separate entities. Above and beyond that, if you want to take additional courses, we have ICS 200C, which is the basic ICS for initial response. So what happens when I just respond to an incident? It gives you basic criteria and basic information around that. 300 is the basic, is intermediate ICS for expanding events. So it takes that 200 course and the 100 and 700 and it builds on it. The 300 course is a live in-person multi-day course that works through a large scenario and how that works and functions. Pardon me. And then ICS 400 is advanced ICS. That's if you're going to fulfill in a supervisor role, you're going to be in a supervisor or a section chief role. That's a good course for you. We also have ICS 800, which is Introduction to the National Response Framework, the NRF. So the NRF is what's built off of NIMS, and it's how we respond to incidents. So the 100, 200, 300, 400, 700, 800 is a great cadre of courses. I will tell you, the ones that are online, they can be tedious, but done fairly quickly. It's really the best option to do it that way online. There are options that pop up from time to time that are in person for the 100, 700, 800, and 200. The problem with those, if I did today's course strictly as a 100, 700 course, it's over a day and a half of content. So you want to make sure that, you know, if you have the ability to go on and just kind of check the box that you did it, the online course is really the best way to do it. One other thing that you need to remember is that there is an SID which is a identification number needed for exams. So you need to make sure you get your SID register for your SID before you take those exams. And it'll give you the link to do it when you get there, when you get into the exams server. Adrenia, back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to thank James for his presentation on today. There were only a couple questions that popped up in the chat box that I was unable to answer. So James, I'm just going to provide those questions to you and see if you can answer those for us. Could each unit have a safety officer?
No, generally there's going to be an overall safety officer because they're responsible for the safety of the overall ICS organization. Now, if we're dealing with a lot of different incident locations, then there may be under the incident, under that, they might create a unit or an assistant that might be on those individual locations that could be for safety for that particular location.
Great. The other question, EOC. I know you explained that, but can you explain that again?
Sure. An EOC is an Emergency Operations Center. So we have one for the Emergency Operations Center. We have one within VDH, but there's also an emergency operation that's a state, or I'm sorry, there's locality level. So each of the health departments have an Emergency Operations Center. Then there's a city local, a local emergency operations center that takes everybody within the city, all the different groups, and brings them together. So at the state level, we have one, and that's where we have those ESFs or emergency support functions. Each of the functions provide a different role or for a different agency or group. So we are in ESF 8 as part of that emergency operations center. That's health and medical. But you have ESF 1, which could be VDOT or the Department of Transportation. You have 17, you have, which could be National Guard. You have public safety, which are the state police. Each of them provides a very specific role and provides input from their agencies. So an EOC basically takes all the kind of brain trust or all the operational pieces and brings them together under one roof.
Okay. Can a MRC volunteer participate in MAC?
Mutual aid compacts, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, they just said MAC, MAC.
Yeah, I would imagine that that's for a MAC, a mutual aid compact. And yes, but that's under if we've been asked to provide a mutual aid compact, or basically a mutual aid compact is when one state asks another state for people or stuff. So I use the example of during a hurricane down in North Carolina, we provided mutual aid compact. Through the mutual aid compact, we provided mutual aid assistance to North Carolina and providing volunteers to them. So yeah, I mean, we can definitely provide it, but that's really not a decision for me to say as an MRC volunteer, I'm going to volunteer for that. It's that one, the request has to be put in, it has to be approved by Virginia as a state, and then that's going to get handed down through the MRC down to the locality to see if we have those options.
Okay, let me just see something here. Where can I find a list of TLAs?
There is a glossary that's been floating around. I have a pretty good one that I will try to get together and send out. I can send to Adrenia to forward out to you. Okay,
I can post that with the slide deck and the recording next week.
Yeah, I won't have that until next week, but I can definitely provide that.
Great. Okay. And I think that was really the main questions pertaining to the training on today. So again, I want to thank James for a great presentation. I want to thank you all for your volunteer interest and all of the work that you all do as a volunteer currently. Today's training will be or has been recorded. We will upload the training slide deck and recording to the training calendar. And I will provide that information again here in the chat box shortly. I did earlier. If you scroll up, you will see that link to the training calendar. And also the attendance form link. If you go to the training calendar, the attendance form is also on that link. And I will provide that link again as well. Please make sure that you get attendance for today's training. Just a reminder, today was an overview of the FEMA ICS 100 and 700 courses. It is a required course to be a volunteer and to deploy, specifically for some MRC units, such as Fairfax and so forth. It is not a requirement to be a vaccinator. I put that in the chat box several times. I hope you all understand that. So it is a requirement to deploy as a MRC volunteer for all roles, but it is not part of the training plan to be a vaccinator specifically. So I hope that answers your questions about that. And again, this was an overview, a refresher course for the required FEMA courses, ICS 100 and 700, which are also listed on the trainings on the MRC training website. If you all have any questions, feel free to contact me by email, and I will definitely try to answer those training questions for you. If they are not training questions, I will provide or forward your question to someone in the MRC admin team that may be able to answer that for you. So I will put the links back up in the chat box here shortly. But again, I want to thank you all for your time as a volunteer and for sharing the morning with us. Thank you so much. And I did hear that the FEMA, I think 100, ICS 100 course may actually be down, James.
It's been up and down lately. They've been, because of the volume that's been going in.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
I know it was also down for maintenance at one point as well.
Okay.